All right, music fans, welcome. Harmless me here talking real music in real time for a few real people out there just like you, just like me. All right, here is Brent Enman. Who's Brent Enman? I don't know. He sent me this and I listened to it and I kind of like it. It's a real diverse collection of stuff ranging from AC/DC-ish sounding material to retro blues pop. Yeah, this is some pretty good music here, independently made, courtesy of Brent, no record label. It's just the one CD sleeve. It's on Amazon, which I think is really cool. So if you wanted to check this out, it's called Retromatic Complete Volumes 1, 2, and 3. Was chatting with Brent over on Facebook, a place I don't like to hang out on, but he was over there and I just decided to say, hey, man, I'm going to give you a plug for this. So check it out if you have an opportunity. It's old school. If you like old school rock and roll, which there are a few of us left. So, and thanks to Brent for sending that out to me. And again, you know, if you got music, it's not that I want to be a kingmaker or anything like that, but and I'm not, because I don't get the views of certain channels here, but I'll check it out. And if I like it, and don't be offended if I don't like it, but I do get things that I just really don't like. And it's hard to tell people. It's just, you know, hey, I listened to your CD. And, you know, the sad truth is it just, yeah, I'm just not into it. So anyway, speaking of the sad truth about Glenn Frey and Don Felder at the end of Glenn's life. I've done a few videos about different relationships within the Eagles family, different musicians like Bernie Leadon and Randy Meisner. People are very much interested in this topic. And one of the reasons I've decided to do a video is because I think both men had regrets. In other words, Don Felder gave this really great sort of glowing speech after Don passed away, not an actual speech, but maybe in written form or interviewed with somebody. I'm not sure. But this is what Felder had to say. He said, Glenn's passing was so unexpected and left me with a very heavy heart filled with sorrow. All right, that doesn't sound like a guy who was vindictive and trying to go after Henley and Frey. I mean, he could have probably issued a much simpler statement, but I think at that point he realized, crap, we're never going to make amends because Glenn is gone. And that's really the sad part of this. He goes, he was so young. He was 67 years old, which is pretty young, still full of amazing genius. However, I would add today, all kinds of crazy things are happening to people at an age far younger than 67. And this is prior to 2020. So this was back when things were normal and people didn't just die at 67 all the time, you know, whereas now it's happening pretty much every day. I get something about someone passing away unexpectedly with no cause of death. So it's kind of interesting. People should kind of look into that. Anyway, he was an extremely talented songwriter, arranger, leader, singer, guitarist, you name it. And Glenn could do it and create magic on the spot. His visions and insights into songs and lyrics have become legendary and will echo throughout time on this earth for decades to come. Glenn was the one who invited me to join the Eagles in 1974, and it turned out to be a gift of a lifetime to have spent so many years working side by side with him. He was funny, strong, and generous. At times, it felt like we were brothers, and at other times, like brothers, we disagreed. Despite our struggles and difficult moments together, we managed to create some magical songs, recordings, and live show. His charisma on stage was felt and loved by millions all over the world. I have many wonderful memories of those years and many miles I traveled with Glenn filled with laughter, songs, parties, hugs, and brotherly bonds. Glenn was the James Dean of the band. He was the leader that we all looked to for direction and by far the coolest guy in the band. It saddens me a great deal that we were never able to address the issues that came between us and talk them through. Sadly, now we will never get the chance. The planet has lost a great man and a wonderful musician. None will ever be able to take his place. May you rest in peace, Glenn Frey, and may God bless you and your lovely family. That's Don Felder. So the sad truth about this is that these guys never got to make amends. Now, toward the end, you could kind of hear a different tone with Felder prior to Glenn's passing, kind of like, yeah, it would be cool if we could get back together again. And the Eagles were kind of united in that, well, that'll happen when hell freezes over, right? So I think I did this in a video where I said it would have to be like Hell Freezes Over Part 2. Don Felder returns to the Eagles. Now, what's sad about the Felder situation is he's been ghosted by Timothy B. Schmidt and Joe Walsh, which is just stupid. It's stupid. Look, there was a contract. There was a contract in 1974. Felder mentions that he joined in 74, and it was Glenn who brought him on board and made him a partner. Okay, and you don't do that in rock bands today. Everybody's a hired hand. Everybody's a hired gun. And they wanted Felder to remain a hired gun or go back to that hired gun status, you know, after Felder started saying, hey, how come I don't get to sing songs? How come my songs aren't being considered? How come I don't get a lead vocal on a song? Well, these guys felt that Felder's voice wasn't up to the task. He did sing on a track called Visions. It's kind of like almost a co-lead vocal, but it is predominantly Don Felder on that song. And then later on, I believe with the help of both Henley and Frey, at least Henley, Felder had a big hit song, at least on rock radio, with Taking a Ride on Heavy Metal, which every rock radio fan just absolutely loves that song. And it kind of does sound like an Eagles song to some degree, a little spacey and a little different. But it's probably the kind of Eagles song that, Henley and Frey wanted to do back when they were complaining how, Led Zeppelin, they rock out, The Who, they really rock out. We want to be like those bands, so we hire Felder. And then, their new hire, ends up biting them in the ass to some degree because he wants a cut. He wants his fair share, which I don't think is unreasonable. Look, again, Felder isn't a songwriting machine or anything like that, but he did come up with the music for one of the greatest songs in rock history, Hotel California. And without Felder's music, there are no lyrics, right? Because you were inspired by that song. What kind of a song can we write around this amazing music that Felder has given us? And so Henley and Frey were inspired to the point where the lyrics actually are as important as the music. And that's what makes Hotel California amazing. And then that one song becomes like a theme for that whole album, like New Kid in Town. All of these songs are built around that song, and Felder, his music inspired one of the great rock albums of all time. So that's like a ripple effect. And because of that, I would say, yeah, Don Felder should be grandfathered in, as a trusted member of the Eagles. And the reason, because he gave us income in perpetuity. He did. I mean, the Eagles were big before Hotel, obviously, but that was like the band and their moonshot. I think Joe Walsh was like, yeah, this was such a creative period. Well, that creativity was inspired by Don Felder, a lot of it. And I'm not saying the band couldn't create something without Felder, but man, that set the stage for, again, the greatest or one of the greatest rock albums of all time. What was ironic is that the band couldn't top that. And they didn't really rely on Felder for much of what became the long run, although side two has some Felder stuff in there, like Those Shoes, which is, again, a great riff and was basically what the Eagles wanted to do. They wanted to be a more serious rock band and not a country rock band, which some will say is kind of a mistake, that they should have just stuck to their guns. They should have surfed through the 70s with their sound intact. They could have been Steely Dan or Fleetwood Mac and not really mess with the formula. It worked really well for Steely Dan. They never tried to be anything but who they were, but the Eagles were really inspired by bands like The Who and Led Zeppelin and other harder rocking bands. And they're not really a harder rocking band. They can rock out, no question. Life in the Fast Lane, great song. Victim of Love, great song. Victim of Love, by the way, another Felder hook. Life in the Fast Lane, a Joe Walsh hook. Yeah, so this was a team effort, but they really did need Felder. And Felder complained, and they didn't like that. The sad truth, though, is that they could have made up later on in life. You know, the damage was done because Felder wrote the book, the tell-all book, the Heaven and Hell book, which I have and I've read. And yeah, there are some portions of that book that even kind of imply that maybe Don Henley was like a one-trick pony on drums. And Felder was hoping maybe that Don could play a little differently on songs, and that would help the band maybe create more up-tempo rocking songs. But Don Henley has a certain style of drumming, and people can hear that, by the way. And I like it, but maybe in the context of being a harder rock band, that wasn't working. You know, that was part of the problem. And I give Felder a lot of credit, though, because he gives this statement at the end and says, hey, we disagreed, but this guy was like the James Dean of the band. He was amazing. And I don't think it really had the impact on the rest of the Eagles that it should have. Like, hey, Felder, look at this. He's sorry. He's sad. He issues a statement that, quite honestly, is as powerful as anything the other band members said at the time of Glenn's passing. Quite honestly, too, I think there was a rivalry between Glenn Frey and Don Henley, which even to the end, I think, was probably there. The reason I say that is because both of those guys had a vision for the Eagles. And I think that helped break the band up. You didn't hear that much in 1980 about the relationship between Henley and Frey, but definitely there was a rift there. And, you know, these guys, if you look at their solo careers, also very different. I think Glenn Frey almost continued that Eagles tradition, except for the album he did that was really a tribute to like Al Green, the Soul Searching album. But Don Henley wanted to reinvent the wheel pretty much on every album. He was one of those guys that continued to kind of push the envelope. And I liked both of their styles, but that's what I think made the Eagles interesting, is you had that chemistry, and then you add Walsh and Felder and Tim Schmidt, and you've really got a very interesting rock band with different influences and people kind of pulling things in different directions. But that's what made Hotel California very creative. That's kind of what made the long run misfire a little bit. Um, but in the end, this is still an amazing rock band. And it's just really sad that Frey and Felder couldn't have patched things up. And that would have also required that Felder patch things up with Don Henley. In recent years, Felder has given Henley a ton of credit for the lyrics on Hotel California, saying that Henley writes in these word pictures. Here's another scene. Here's another scene. The fact that Felder understands the songwriting and his interpretation of that songwriting, I think it shows you that, number one, he's giving Henley lots of credit. Number two, he realizes that, hey, that is an amazing song as far as the lyrical content, in addition to Felder's music, which obviously inspired everything. So if you're a fan of the Eagles and you just think to yourself, man, these guys, they should have patched things up. They should have just gotten back together again. I mean, look, Stuart Smith, you can praise him all you want. He's the current guitarist in the Eagles, kind of replaced, Felder, and he's has a double neck guitar, and he tries to be Don Felder. He's just not Felder. Felder, if you go watch Felder out there, there's like this one concert that he and Peter Frampton, if you Google that and watch those two guys on stage together, and you realize, as much as I love Peter Frampton, Felder is insane. I mean, they're both really good, but Don Felder is a beast. He's very subdued. He's not flashy in the sense that he doesn't run around stage and try to be like a poser up there with his guitar. He's more of like, hey, watch this. And he just goes to town. And I think a lot of times people are looking at that and saying, he's just doing what he is supposed to do. Whereas Joe Walsh is over there flailing away and doing all kinds of crazy things. And that gets Joe a lot of attention. And Joe's a great player, no question. I mean, to have that much guitar firepower in one band, and maybe that's the problem. These guys underutilized those two great guitar players. Even when they were pointing in that direction, they didn't write that many songs that showcased those two guys going back and forth. Hotel, Victim of Love, Life in the Fast Lane, Those Shoes. I mean, a lot of it is more like, hey, I'm going to lay down a really tasty solo here. And then Joe will lay down a solo, where these guys could have been, yammering back and forth on guitar and making like a beautiful noise, and maybe do like an epic 8-minute, Green Grass and High Tides Forever kind of song, where they're just going back and forth. You've got some lyrics at the beginning, you got a great melody, and then just let those guys go to town. They never ever did that, which is probably, something that was a missed opportunity. It could still be an opportunity if, Don Felder was allowed to rejoin the Eagles. I think hell will have to freeze over again for that to happen, which is, again, part of the sad truth of the story of Glenn Frey and Don Felder. And you could put in there probably Don Henley and Don Felder, but with Glenn was just a one of a kind, and nobody has been able to replace Glenn Frey in the Eagles. And quite honestly, nobody has replaced Don Felder in the Eagles either. So that's my take. You may disagree. You may think, this current Eagles with, Vince Gill and Stuart Smith and all the support cast, the occasional visit from Deacon Frey. I mean, Deacon helps you a little bit when it comes to forgetting about Glenn, but again, he doesn't really sound that much like his father. So I don't know. It's all designed to make you either forget a little bit about the past or kind of overlay a new paradigm over the past. And it's okay for the casual fan. The longtime fans, hey, we know the Eagles live album that came out, what was it, like 1980-ish? Just a flawless album. Yeah, I'm sure there are a few overdubs on that record, but man, does that stuff sound good. It's just the band in their prime. And even the Hell Freezes Over stuff, I think, is brilliant. Just, it showed that this band still had a lot of gas in the tank, and here they are. They're still going. They've got the full orchestra, and they're selling out shows, and they've got dynamic ticket pricing, which means that you might pay like $800 for a ticket. As soon as they start selling, the price starts to go up. And, you know, Irving Azoff, he's a businessman. And Don Henley had a few nice descriptive words for Irving, but he's part of the Eagles team, and he makes that band a ton of money even now. I think if Irving was really smart, he would just propose this and say, hey, Don, meaning Don Henley, let's bring Felder back. You don't have to talk to him. You don't even have to like him. Bring him back, you know? And of course, you'd have to have the same talk with Joe Walsh and Tim Schmidt. And then you'd have to kick Stewart to the curb, which I think would be okay, right? So that's my video. Sorry about the long-winded nature of the video. I'm trying to give you your money's worth, right? So speaking of getting your money's worth, check out Brent Enman. Pretty cool. Retromatic Complete Volumes 1, 2, and 3. Basic rock and roll, old school, the way it used to be made. I mean, this, folks, this isn't going to be happening, I don't think, for that much longer. I mean, it will be, but nobody's going to care. That's the problem. Unless there's some kind of rock revival, which we are well overdue for. We can hope for that. In the meantime, we've got all of those memories out there, including the Eagles. And if you really want to go see them on tour, then start saving your money right now. All right. See you soon.